I chose the yellow file. I actually went into the game on the blue file by accident and then I had to back out to choose the yellow file. That's how much I care about choosing the right file. There are cases where my opinion is not actually that useful, right? Like to listen to me talk about how I specifically felt about a game is not going to be that useful. And this is a perfect example. Like I have a ton of experience with puzzle games and a ton of experience with Sokoban puzzle games specifically. And this is a genre where skills are extremely transferable between different games. So and like I'm also just naturally good at these games to start with. Like there are some games that I'm not very good at. I'm not like great at first person shooters naturally, for example. But yeah, these games like I have gotten to a point by playing a ton of these games that like what excites me in this genre at this point is something that like no one else wants. Like what excites me in this genre and in a Sokoban game at this point is something that's like way too difficult for like 99.99% of people. And that's just I'm really not trying to flex here. I'm just trying to be real and this is like, you know, I'm trying to explain the situation here, right? Like it's just not useful for me to talk only about my experience with this kind of game. Um So when I talk about a game like this, I try to at least make an educated guess of like how it would land for other people, and then I can recommend it accordingly, right? Like I can recommend, and I do this a lot, and I have a pretty good track record of doing this of like recommending a game that I didn't like to some specific person. Like I will recommend a game I didn't like, and they will come back and tell me that they loved it, and I feel like I like being able to do that, right? But obviously, that's a very safe thing to do, just to tell someone to play a game. Whereas, what I'm going to be doing here is a little bit more potentially inflammatory, which is to say that I don't really think that anyone. I don't think that anyone should love this game. I don't really think that this game should be particularly exciting to anyone. And I realize that's going to rub people the wrong way, but um, I accept that as the consequence of me giving my honest take on this game. So my core problem with this game is that it really needed an ideas guy. Okay? You guys know the ideas guy meme? Like it's kind of a meme that like, oh, they should hire me. Well, what are you going to do? What are you gonna? What role are you? They're gonna hire you for? Oh, they should hire me as an ideas guy. Like you don't really have any real skills. You just are going to give game ideas, and then other people are gonna make them for you. And it's just a big meme that like anyone would actually want to do that. And obviously, there's truth to that perspective that like often people say like, oh yeah, there's no value in that kind of thing. And I think there's something to that perspective. But I also think it's true that there just obviously are like $1 million ideas. And, many steps down from that, there are solid original ideas that are good enough, to justify, to make a good game, to make a really special game. And I think in puzzle games specifically, I've talked about this before on Twitter. Uh, Originality is extremely important for puzzle games specifically. And people who mostly think about action games and stuff don't understand this. I was talking about it recently because someone was making fun of Jonathan Blow's new game getting announced. And they were like, let me guess, a puzzle game with a twist? And it's like, okay, sure. I mean, it's kind of funny just the framing of that, right? And I get that, but like people were retweeting this, and it's kind of stupid because like it's kind of a stupid thing to say because like what do you want, a puzzle game without a twist? Like you want a puzzle game that's solving the same puzzles that you've solved in other puzzle games? Like I guess people think that like level design makes it different enough because that's kind of the case for action games. Like action games, it's much more possible for something to be enjoyable or at least like comfy, even to really be like a very interesting game, but to at least be like a comfy low effort type of game without being super original. But for puzzle games, like everyone wants their puzzle game to have a twist. Everyone wants their puzzle game that they make, and everyone wants their puzzle game that they play to have a twist. And that's exactly why everyone dismisses Sokoban games, right? Like they dismiss it because it seems like a very been there, done that type of thing that, you know, they've seen a million times. And they even dismiss it when there actually is a twist, like, you know, something like Snakebird, where there actually is a major consequential twist that just doesn't really look quite as consequential as it actually is. Think about what was the biggest breakout puzzle game hit in the past decade. It's Baba Is You, right? It's Baba Is You, which is like by far the biggest, like, or at least the most obvious twist that a puzzle game has had in the last in that last decade. So like obviously everyone wants their puzzle game to have a twist. So for a puzzle game you need new ideas, and this game I feel like is a really good example of it's, you know, it's a really well put together game. You know, you could imagine like fancier graphics and things like that, but gameplay wise, you know, I have a hard time critiquing like, or like nitpicking the level design here. I have a hard time nitpicking this game in a lot of ways, except for the fact that it just didn't have good enough ideas in the first place. Like it just isn't original enough, really. Yeah, if you're making a Sokoban game in 2026, you really do need an ideas guy, right? But then again, a good ideas guy is also probably not thinking Sokoban at this point either. Like if you know, this is one of the most thoroughly explored genres, maybe the most thoroughly explored genres in terms of like all the different things you could actually do with it. Like most of them have kind of been done, I feel like. You really do need a big new idea to make me really care, and this game is a good example of why. Like studying exactly why these levels struggle to be interesting despite being really well designed, I think reveals a lot about why puzzle games need originality. So one thing about puzzle game design that, if you're in the puzzle game world at all, you have heard this topic brought up many times probably, is everyone loves this type of puzzle that's like, it's the like, it looks clearly impossible puzzle, right? It's the puzzle that is super simple. Like it's not actually that complicated, but you look at it and it seems clearly impossible, right? And that's something that's kind of like, yeah, it's a major thing that puzzle designers strive to do all the time whenever they can. And I think there's definitely something to that. But I think it's worth like exploring a little bit why that is the case. And one way that I think about this is it's framing something that you don't it's framing something that you don't understand, which is why it looks impossible. But it's framing it in a way that doesn't make you work through anything that you already do understand, which is, you know, why it's simple. it's it's simple, which means it's not making you work through anything you already do understand. But it seems impossible, which means that it's clearly trying to show you something that you don't understand. And so that kind of means that you're both interested and motivated to play it, right? And I like to think about interest and motivation kind of separately sometimes, because like I am interested. Well, bear with me for a second. Okay. I'm interested in general relativity, right? But I am not motivated to put in the work to really understand general relativity. there's a very big difference there. And on the other hand, I might be motivated to play an MMO for 1,000 hours. Like that's a very easy thing to do. But would I find it interesting to do that? Probably not. In fact, I would probably mostly regret doing that. That's kind of how I think about the clearly impossible puzzle thing, the quote unquote clearly impossible puzzle. It's about it's really just about the ratio of effort to reward. You want the puzzle to be low effort and high reward. Like obviously. It's stupid when you put it that way, but like I think people don't clearly understand this. And if you think about it that way, then you can kind of also think about puzzles that are almost there but not quite, or puzzles that give you the interest but not the motivation, or puzzles that give you the motivation but not the interest. And I think that really helps talk about this game. So these early puzzles that I'm showing right now, like I'm kind of just fumbling my way through them. Like I'm spending some time on this one. Spent several minutes on this one actually, but they kind of solve themselves. Like I look at it, I mess around a little bit, but mostly I just intuit my way through them. I don't have to actually stop and think hard or really learn a major new thing. It's like the puzzles the puzzles are kind of isomorphic to puzzles in other games that I've already played. So often I'm putting in the effort to just get to the recognition that, oh yeah, I've done this before in a different game. And, you know, that's not that satisfying. It makes even a small amount of effort feel like work. So this is kind of what an example of like you know, where I might be motivated to get through the puzzles because it's easy enough to do it. It doesn't require much effort, but I'm not interested. I don't feel like I'm getting enough out of getting through these puzzles, right? And so I don't really want to keep playing because I don't feel like the game is giving me anything. There are a few puzzles that are the opposite. They're very high effort and very high reward. So, you know, they're really interesting because they have something to teach you, but you really have to think hard and hold a lot of things in your head. And here's where I kind of disagree with some of the puzzle design wisdom that floats around a little bit. Like I kind of disagree with the way that people talk about this whole clearly impossible puzzle as like the holy grail of puzzle design. I don't always want like as minimal effort as possible. I don't always want the puzzle design to minimize effort as much as possible, because sometimes effort pays off. And in a puzzle like this, it pays off. You know, it pays off with the revelation of the thing that you were missing, which I didn't really get that kind of revelation from the early game puzzles. But it also pays off with a really beautiful process of solving the puzzle, which if you want more, this review is going to be long enough without me getting into that. But if you want more about that, you can read the Sneckbird section of my 2025 Game of the Year post. Yeah, I talked more about I talked a little bit more about the solving process in some of the more complicated Sneckbird puzzles, and a lot of that kind of applies here. But yeah, when there's more complex thought processes, obviously you can get to, you know, something more interesting in terms of what's actually like the beauty of what is actually happening in your brain as you solve the puzzle. Obviously, when you have to use your brain more, obviously that can make more beautiful things happen in your brain. So yeah, I like puzzles like this that ask more of you. I will say though that compared to something like Sneckbird, which I wrote about in that 2025 post, this puzzle in this game, puzzles like this in general in this game would land so much better if I could trust the game by this point. Because when I got here, like this is one of the last puzzles in the game, right? When I got to this point, I did not trust the game at all to be consistently interesting, right? Because I went through so many of those puzzles that were very similar to puzzles I've solved in other games before. So when I got here, I didn't trust the game to be interesting. So it took a while for me to accept that, you know, this puzzle is actually framing an interesting idea that I don't already understand, rather than something trivial that I'm just missing because I'm, you know, overlooking it or whatever. And this gets to another one of the kind of fundamental issues with this game. I said at the beginning that the mechanics are not very original. You know, the puzzle mechanics are not very original. That kind of changes as the game goes on. It introduces this swapper mechanic, which the way that this thing works, this triangle, this arrow object that's on the screen right now, is like if it's not currently being powered by a laser and you step in front of its line of sight, it'll swap with you immediately, and then it gets unpowered. And then when it gets repowered, it instantly swaps back with the thing that it previously swapped with and gets repowered. And there's just it's just a pretty arbitrary mechanic, right? It's like two different effects kind of combined together in a confusing way. There are interesting, consequences. There are interesting surprises that result from that, but they just aren't as interesting, or they're not as, let's just say they're not as good. They don't make for as good a game as the very simple, elegant rules of something like Snekbird, or let's just say Snakebird, the original Snakebird, since it's the one that defined the puzzle rules. Snakebird has a few very simple rules, and then a ton of interesting complexity emerges from those very simple rules. And that's just much more beautiful as a rule set. And because the rule set is more beautiful, I more highly value each unit of understanding that the puzzles give me, right? When I get something out of a puzzle, when I understand something new from solving a puzzle in Snakebird, I value that more than I do in this game, because that understanding is pointing at something that's more fundamental. It's pointing at like something more like a mathematical concept that has some like universal abstract truth to it. Whereas this is maybe more pointing at something arbitrarily defined by the game designer. But also, so I value each unit of understanding more, but I also get to those units of understanding more easily in something like Snakebird, and I can get to more of them because I can get deeper. I can handle more complexity in Snakebird because I'm not wading through this swamp of arbitrary, confusing edge cases and stuff. Like, elegant rules with natural consequences are easier to work with in your head, whereas messy rules, they necessarily demand more effort, more thinking effort to engage with them at any particular depth. Yeah, it just gets unwieldy. Like, this is a perfect example of what I'm doing right now. Like, it just gets unwieldy and annoying very quickly. You kind of have to stay relative to something like Snakebird, you have to stay more in the shallow end. You can't get as deep with these mechanics because even at this depth in this puzzle, it's like straining my brain to when I finally started actually thinking about it, I found it very strenuous to like keep everything in my head and trace through. I mean, I could have taken notes and made it easier, I guess, but like regardless, that's asking a lot of the player, right? And yeah, I feel like my working memory, I'm guessing it's working memory that's the main relevant factor here. I think my working memory is like pretty good. I don't know if it's amazing, but I think I'm probably better than the average puzzle game player on working memory. And I still found this very strenuous, this puzzle, and a few others in the game. One other in particular that I'll show in a minute. Even though I did like this puzzle, I did feel like it was worth it once I finally convinced myself to like put in the effort and actually think hard about it. I did think it was worth it, but I think with a better concept, with a better concept, more like, a better rule set, like more like Snakebirds, like I'm talking about, something like this could have been the very first puzzle in the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is one of the very last puzzles in this game. And I think something like this could have been the very first puzzle in a much longer game, because from the earlier swapper puzzles, the earlier puzzles that focus on the same mechanic, I really didn't learn anything that I couldn't have just learned in this puzzle. Like, I learned the type of stuff that I learned from the earlier swapper puzzles was like just getting familiar with the basic rules of the object. And that like takes a little bit of time and effort because, like I said, they're kind of arbitrary and confusing, but you don't even really need puzzles for that. Like, you can just make me do that in this, in a puzzle like this. That's hard. You can make me do that messing around stage without an actual puzzle specifically to frame the messing around. This is kind of a whole other topic. I might cut this from the YouTube video because this is a whole other topic I might get into some other time. You really do have to use like a lot of different aspects of, you have to understand pretty clearly if you want to actually deduce your way to this solution in this puzzle rather than just messing around and trying every possibility. You have to think really hard, but you also have to really deduce some some interesting implications of this basic mechanic that I really enjoyed doing that. But yeah, it's just weird that it was all in one puzzle. Like every interesting deduction for this mechanic was all in one puzzle for me. And maybe, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was unusual that I was able to intuit my way through everything up to that point. But I don't know. But yeah, another puzzle. Let me show one more puzzle that actually did have like a big new idea, and one other puzzle that I did really like. Create conditions. This is probably I think this is the puzzle I spent the longest on. This is another one that, like, despite the complexity, was really worth it. It's really, it's like an amazing work of puzzle design in the way of like, it just barely works. It like, there's so many little things that you have to do just right, and you're not, I don't know. I feel like it would be pretty hard to fumble your way toward this solution. You kind of have to do the complicated deductions that are required, and there's like a lot of independent little things that you have to realize kind of one piece at a time, and it all slots together really nicely. Just a lot of different ideas coming into alignment in one puzzle. Even though the puzzle is not that complicated, right? You know, at least visually it's not that complicated. But yeah, again, it was frustrating at first. This puzzle was frustrating at first because I expected it was going to be like every other puzzle. I figured I was just taking longer on this puzzle because I was missing something obvious. And yeah, I don't know how true this is for everyone else, but like for me, my subconscious resists thinking hard about something that it expects to not be very interesting, right? Like I want to work hard on things that are interesting, or at least in games I do. I mean, you know, obviously in real life you can't always work on the most interesting problems. You have to work on things that are boring sometimes, and you have to get your mind to do that. But I can focus much better and think much more clearly and think in a much more sustained way and keep my focus for much longer if I'm working on something that I believe is going to be interesting. And the game just did not build the trust before this puzzle that was required to make me like trust this puzzle from the outset, rather than kind of, I just had to do some convincing, right? I had to convince my subconscious mind to work hard on this puzzle, but eventually I got there. I will show one puzzle that's an exception. That's more like what um, you know, it's. I feel like this is where the game really hit the mark. It did the. I don't want to say clearly impossible because the puzzle just isn't that hard, or at least for me it wasn't that hard. But it it comes the closest to that type of thing. It has that balance of, you know, it has that low effort, high reward type of thing that I feel like most modern puzzle game designers are always striving for. And yeah, it's like an actually new idea that I haven't necessarily seen, or haven't seen quite this way in other puzzle games. It's perfectly tight level design. Like I wouldn't take a single piece out of this. It's easy to think about. It has little twists and turns throughout the level, but you can still kind of intuit your way through. You don't have to like think super hard about it. So here, what I'm doing here is, whoops, wait, what did I just do? Oh, okay. So what I'm doing here is, so normally to power these portals, you need the beam pointed straight at it, right? But you can misdirect the beam like that. But what you have to do is you have to set up this thing where the beams power themselves, right? The beams are powering themselves through the portal to power the portal at the same time. But then the way, yeah, there's just little twists with where you have the way that you have to keep it powered while going back through it multiple times to get all the things that you need. Because like when you get through here with the beam, you realize, well, I can't actually shoot the light bulb with the beam with what I have. I need the thing back from the other side of the portal. So how am I going to get that back? And so you have to like realize, oh wait, I can just go back to the normal way, right? Like at this point, the level has set your expectations to think that you have to do something crazy with this new idea, but no, you actually just need to use the beam in the obvious way again. So that's kind of an interesting, you know, twist with your expectations and everything. And then you can't push that through the obvious way. You have to do it. Yeah, it's just a bunch of nice little twists and turns, and then you can finally do it. Like that's a perfect, like I feel like what most game designers would consider a really a really great puzzle. And yeah, I think even in a game focused on the kind of crazy hard puzzles like I was just showing that were my favorites, I think it often makes sense to include some that are like that, at least like in the early game, because, if nothing else, it helps establish trust, like I was just talking about. And then when the player gets to the really hard stuff, they don't want to just give up immediately. They don't get frustrated immediately. They know how interesting the game is before they're asked to expend a lot of effort. So that's kind of how I feel about the game. Like I said, it's just not original enough for the first long chunk of the game, and then when it does introduce kind of somewhat new mechanics, they are just too contrived, too arbitrary. The fact is, I kind of hate games like this. And that's a really extreme thing to say, I realize, because this is kind of like a good game. Like this is okay. So to be clear, I absolutely do not hate the creator of this game, and I don't even hate that this game exists. It's really about it's about the reception. Like, I assume this game was made by someone who really loves puzzle games and got inspired and all of that, and like is just being creative and whatever, maybe practicing their level design, whatever. Like, there is nothing wrong with this game existing. There's nothing wrong with putting it out for sale or anything like that. Even without big new ideas like I would prefer to have and all of that. But it really annoys me how games like this always get hyped up as being worthy of my time. And this is something that I see in like every genre. It's these it's these ultra insular communities where people just want to play this one genre forever, right? And like long after they've played all of the actually great games in the genre, they just okay. Let me parallel to a different genre. Let me talk about a different genre other than this kind of Sokoban puzzle game space. On Twitter, you very often see these kind of these modern arcade inspired games that they seem pretty mid. They seem pretty mid. Just at a glance, I can kind of tell this is not really going to stand the test of time. This is like made by someone who loves arcade games, and that's great, but this is not going to be something that people are recommending playing or whatever 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the way that we still talk about cave games and Psycho games and things like that. But you see them reposted on Twitter, and it's not just like pity reposts. It's like people seem genuinely excited about these games, but then after a few weeks, you never hear about them ever again. Like maybe they get a low rank game of the year list mention at the end of the year from people with like super narrow taste in games. And this is the problem. Like, I don't think that a game like this or a game like the ones that I'm talking about that I see get reposted on Twitter, like these arcade inspired games, it's not that I think that these games deserve no recognition. Because like I said, this game is really well designed in some ways. In some dimensions, this is really in every way. Like, I think this is a well designed game, other than it just does not have an interesting enough concept. But the fact is, if we think about who should actually be playing this game, I can't figure out why someone should really be playing this game. Okay, so for someone who's not experienced in this genre, they're better off playing the classics in the genre. Like this is just repackaging. It's mostly repackaging ideas from classics in the genre and then putting some kind of arbitrary, not that great stuff on top of it at the end. Whereas for someone who's experienced in the genre, they're like me. It's not really giving them much that's new. Like, at least as a player, it's not giving them much that's new. Like, some of the people who praise stuff like this are designers for these kind of games. And obviously, if that's you, like, you can study things about this game and learn, even if it's not like an amazing game overall, you can study things about it and learn. But I think when it comes to that, the same thing is true for designers as it is for players, which is that branching out is good. Okay? And this is my point here, and this is why I get frustrated about this topic, and this is why I want to say this whole controversial thing in the first place. It frustrates me how close-minded people are with games. Branching out is good. There is so much to learn. You know, let's say you're a designer, like I was saying, like there is so much to learn about puzzle games by playing the best games in other genres, right? Especially because the main problem in this genre right now is the lack of originality, right? This needs more ideas from outside the space, more than anything else. That's what this genre needs. But regardless, like even if you're learning a lot by studying the puzzle design and whatever, like there is an opportunity cost, right? There is an opportunity cost to playing this game. Like hyping up games like this, it really helps keep people's taste stunted forever, because people buy into the hype and they play stuff like this every month instead of branching out. And yeah, they're just stuck playing these games forever. And I feel like I see this all the time. There's people who just play one genre. Tons of interesting games come out every year, man. Like last year we got Baby Steps, we got Sectori, we got Blueprints, we got Peak. I haven't even played I haven't played Blueprints yet either. And that's the problem. Like I don't even have time to play all the interesting games that are coming out. Like to play all of these games. And like, you know, I wrote a big blog post about 10 other games besides these like well-known ones that I think are extremely interesting and well worth playing, you know, that are doing new things. Like to play all of these games reasonably thoroughly would take hundreds of hours. And that's just 2025. Like there's a million games not from 2025 that you haven't played. And that's just games. Like, do you understand? Like there's so much good art in the world. You can never appreciate 1% of it. Like you haven't read Moby Dick. You haven't read Proust. Let's be real. We have no, I haven't either. Like I'm 2 books into Proust and it's amazing, but like, there's just so much to do and it takes time. And like, that's just art, right? Like you have things that you want to do in your life. And it's just, I just think that people should divide a little bit more clearly. Have more distinction between the level of hype for something like this that is good but not great, and something that really that's really special and doing new things. And what I'm saying is it's not that I think that people aren't enjoying this game, the people who are hyping this up and recommending it, that they aren't enjoying it, but I think that they would be happier if they did other things instead with their time. And yeah, again, this is a very unassuming game, so in a way it's absurd for me to choose this as the time to do this rant, but it really stood out to me in this way. Like it's just one example of like the flavor of the month Sokoban puzzle game that is not nearly as interesting as people are saying it is. So yeah, it's an unassuming game and it's actually good for what it is. Like I don't resent the creator or anything like that. The creator did a really good job. And again, I actually enjoyed a few of the puzzles quite a bit. I enjoy this more than the average game, right? It's just like the overhyping really drives me crazy, because like I could have done something else with my time, and I think everyone could have done something else with their time. All of that said, I might be wrong, okay? Taste is complicated. I don't completely understand how your brain works, right? Like no 2 brains work the same way. So maybe there are valid reasons why people like this game as much as they act like they do, you know? And maybe even this entire thing of playing one genre forever, like maybe it's valid that they do that. Maybe for them it takes a full lifetime to explore one genre. And so they're doing the right thing for them. You know, I kind of doubt it, but you know, maybe. Another possibility I considered is that maybe there's some kind of like scheming kind of thing going on where, you know, the people praising this game don't actually think that the game is that great, but they want to encourage promising up and coming developers, right? Like this is the developer's first game and they don't want to be mean, and they don't want to, you know, they want to encourage the developer so that the developer keeps going and hopefully makes something great later. But I feel like what I'm saying does that, you know? I feel like that's what I'm doing here. I'm describing why I'm saying that the developer shows promise, but is not quite there yet, right? Whereas like acting like the overall game is already great, that just encourages them to make more of the same. And I feel like I see that often. I see developers that think that they're already doing it right and they just have to keep doing what they're doing because they don't get the specific like criticism of what they're still doing wrong. And I feel like you have to help people identify what's missing. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. Like, you really, really, really want better ideas than this. And hopefully I explained why in the early part of the review. But yeah, I can imagine how I might be missing something here. I can imagine how I might be wrong about how this game lands for other people and things like that. So feel free to comment with your disagreement about that or about anything. You can always comment your disagreement. I'm interested why people disagree with my takes. And yeah, even though I'm talking about other people's taste and how other people play games, like it's still, what I'm saying is still coming from my value system, right? Like there's a distinction, there's a subtle distinction there. Like I'm describing how a game lands for someone else, but I'm describing why that might be good or bad from my value system. So obviously there's a lot of room for disagreement here. So yeah, curious if anyone's gonna get really mad about that, because I feel like it came out way more controversial than I planned. Yeah, that is the main thing that this game made me feel. This game made me feel real fired up about how people hype up mid a lot. I've stunned everyone into silence with my extremely offensive suggestion that people should not like the things that they like. But you know, that's how I feel about it. I just really feel like people think that they are going to live forever and act like they're going to live forever. And to have good taste in games, you have to embrace death, right? You have to accept your mortality to have good taste in games. That's how I feel about it.